The civil war between the Tamils and Sinhalese in Sri Lanka began in the 1970s and lasted almost 30 years. The roots of the conflict lie in discrimination against the Tamil minority by the Sinhalese government. The Sinhalese, who constitute most of the population, have held political and economic power in Sri Lanka through treachery and discriminated against and oppressed the Tamils since the country's independence in 1948. The Tamils felt oppressed and marginalized and began to fight for their rights. They demanded greater autonomy and political participation. However, the government ignored their demands and began to violently suppress them. The organization began with peaceful protests and political activities, but after their demands were not met, they soon turned to violence. The Liberation Tigers of Tamil Eelam, LTTE, was an armed group that fought in the civil war in Sri Lanka from 1976 to 2009. The group was founded by Vellapillai Prabhakaran and was also known as the Tamil Tigers. The LTTE fought for the independence of a Tamil state in northern and eastern Sri Lanka and was considered a freedom fighter by many Tamils. Prabhakaran was born in Sri Lanka in 1954 and grew up in a Tamil village. He joined the Tamil independence movement at an early age and founded the LTTE in 1976. He was a charismatic leader who was considered a hero and liberator by many Tamils. The LTTE carried out numerous attacks and guerrilla operations during the Civil War and was notorious for its tactics of suicide bombings and kidnappings. They also campaigned against the so-called traitors, who collaborated with the Sinhalese government. The LTTE at times controlled large areas of northern and eastern Sri Lanka and had its own army, navy, and air force. It was also known for its ability to mobilize resources and organize its supporters. The LTTE had a well-organized army that included various units over the years. Fighters were usually recruited and trained by the organization itself. The LTTE army had a large number of light weapons, including machine guns, grenade launchers, and rocket launchers. Some of its fighters were also equipped with heavy weapons such as artillery and tanks that had been captured or purchased by the LTTE. The LTTE Navy consisted of a fleet of small boats used primarily for transporting weapons and fighters. They were also capable of carrying out attacks on Sri Lankan Navy vessels. The LTTE also used divers and floats to conduct attacks on Sri Lankan ships and ports. The LTTE's air force consisted primarily of small aircraft and helicopters used for reconnaissance missions and occasional attacks. Most of the aircraft were built by the LTTE itself or acquired from its supporters abroad. The LTTE was also able to use drones and remotely piloted aircraft for reconnaissance missions and attacks. It is important to note that the LTTE's military strength increased during the conflict. The LTTE fought 4 Eelam wars against the Sri Lankan government. The First Eelam War began in 1983 and ended in 1987 with the Indo-Sri Lankan Agreement, which provided for the creation of a provisional government and the introduction of Tamil as an official language. The Second Eelam War began in 1990 and ended in 1995 with a ceasefire agreement and the creation of a buffer zone around Jaffna. The Third Eelam War began in 1995 and ended in 2002 with a ceasefire agreement between the LTTE and the government. The Fourth Eelam War began in 2006 and ended in 2009 with the government's victory and the LTTE's defeat. The LTTE also had some notable successes in the conflict with the government. During the Second Eelam War, the LTTE captured the city of Jaffna and controlled it for 5 years. This was one of their greatest successes. In 2000, the LTTE attacked the international airport in Colombo and destroyed several aircraft. This attack illustrated their ability to attack even highly secured targets. The LTTE also won the Battle of Mullaitivu, an important military victory for them. During the conflict with the Sri Lankan government, the LTTE had to be able to maintain its own infrastructure and be self-sufficient. This included generating electricity and securing communications networks. The LTTE had a well-organized system for generating electricity, based primarily on hydroelectric power and diesel generators. This also included wind turbines and solar panels. The LTTE also controlled several important water resources in the areas they controlled and used them to generate electricity. These included the Iranamadu Reservoir in northern Sri Lanka, which was the main source of hydroelectric power for the Kalinachi plant. The LTTE also built small hydroelectric plants along rivers and streams to meet its needs. The LTTE also had its own telecommunications system and used satellite and shortwave radio to secure its communications and be independent of government infrastructure. In addition, the LTTE had its own postal and courier service to transport its messages and letters safely and efficiently. The LTTE also operated its own airline, called Air Tigers, and had several small aircraft to transport goods and weapons. However, their capabilities were limited because they had a limited number of aircraft and could not acquire legal aircraft due to the embargoes. The LTTE was also able to secure its own food supply by practicing agriculture in the areas they controlled. They grew rice, vegetables, and fruits and also used livestock to meet their own needs and those of the civilian population. Overall, the LTTE was able to meet its own needs independent of government infrastructure and maintain its autonomy. During Sri Lanka's civil war between 1983 and 2009, the Sinhalese government committed war crimes, according to numerous reports and investigations by international human rights organizations. These include the targeted killing of civilians, attacks on hospitals and humanitarian facilities, and torture and sexual violence against prisoners. In addition, people were deported to camps and forced into forced labor. These allegations have been documented by various international organizations and governments. Between 40,000 and 70,000 Tamil civilians were killed by the Sinhalese government during the conflict, particularly during the final phase in 2009. Numerous cases of sexual violence, torture, and enforced disappearances have also been documented. Sri Lanka's Office of Missing Persons, OMP, states that more than 20,000 people are still missing, mostly Tamils, since the civil war began in 1983. The LTTE was defeated by government forces in May 2009, and Prabhakaran was killed in an engagement. It is estimated that more than 100,000 people were killed during the war, including many civilians. Prabhakaran was a polarizing figure who was considered a hero and liberator by many Tamils. He are a hero to the Tamils, but the world did not see it in him.